As I've often said, when it comes to doing a sequel to a film, the first question you have to ask is, what is the next story as presented by the initial effort here? So you put out a film, it's very successful. Obviously, the profit motive is, well, this becomes a brand and it's really popular. Let's do another one. And if it's just a repeat of the other, and sometimes that can work depending on the genre and what it is, and that sort of thing, and some elements, if you can present some other angle. More times than not, it's just, well, it's in Vegas instead of New York or something like that, and that kind of thing. But one would hope a little more, especially when it's a film that really hits some strides. And such was the case, in my humble opinion, was the case with Smile, which was in a lot of ways very simple, and yet in its simplicity told this tortured story of, well, this terrible torment that this woman suffered at the hands of this strange demonic entity. It lays the groundwork of an overall lore in that you know it's this evil force. You don't really know what it is entirely. There's people trying to figure it out, and it leads you to think maybe she'll succeed, and it looks like she almost did, and oh, damn it. So, of course, as it ends, well, this whatever it is can continue on. And so, of course, the movie was, I guess, something of a sleeper hit, but it did very well, and so you do another one. And so this one, what would it do? What would it expand the lore? Which is the one thing I think you could do to progress from the templates and narratives of the original film. Of course, I always go to the example of Alien and Aliens. You basically had the same plot. Oh, we're trapped. The monster's going to get us. But it's turned around quite successfully in that, in where Aliens, the horror movie, and Aliens is still horror elements in it, but it's more war movie, even to the point of Ripley herself struggling with PTSD, basically. For her overcoming that, as well as defeating the monster and so on. And so if you can kind of coax it in some element of that and develop more upon what this entity is and that sort of thing, then you've successfully moved the story forward. As much as, and I'll say it right up front, I did like this. I did like Smile 2. I don't think it succeeds on those parameters. So it presents an entertaining movie. It presents a very good performance by the lead actress here. She does very well with this. Plus, also in this, well, the big angle and difference is she's basically this, international pop star. She's basically like Lady Gaga. She wears these outfits and stuff, and she's very, very popular. She gets recognized and all that sort of thing. And right off the bat, she's on a comeback, basically, from a terrible tragedy she suffered, and then you eventually get the full details of that. But ultimately, I don't know. It seems to suggest there's a way to defeat this thing. I'm not sure that that's even true in it. And now that I think about it, there's an opening sequence to the film that is rather interesting. This guy who's suffering the same thing, and he's trying to get rid of it. Not sure. He screws up his plan. But ultimately what happens to him is a quick sequence that opens the movie, and it basically is telling you, yeah, this stuff is going on all the time, and there's always another victim of this. And I would have to conclude there's more than one of these demons that do this to people. But in this case, how it concludes for this guy, I think, is some indication on the overall plot here, without spoiling anything, of what this heroine, if you will, tries to do to survive this, and it probably wouldn't have worked at all. Now, a lot of it is because of the longer this goes on, as someone is stuck with this thing, the more you can't trust anything. It's all illusionary, and as I recall, it's even more so here than it was in the previous one. But a lot of it, you're going through the run of it, and some of the elements pertains certainly to her own personal story, but also her position as this pop star that so many people want. And there's hallucinations and whatnot that the demon does to her that is mocking that and using it against her and that sort of thing. But so it's really saved by the main star. She carries the movie very well and is believable as the singer. I don't know if that's her really singing, but it looks like it. And just the whole thing and all that stuff she's got to put up with to get it done, because there's a lot of choreography and dancing and outfits and all this sort of thing for her shows, and just the demands of it, and everybody around her is trying to maintain this, because if she fails, they're all out of a job. Stuff like that, which can weigh heavily on this. In the previous one, you had this woman who was in the medical profession, a therapist and all that, and the travails that associate with that. Here it's this famous celebrity and pop singer, and then there's all that her own life begins to work against her in this struggle she's having with this whatever it is. But as far as anything going forward, or someone who might have more knowledge of it, it's something that, I could imagine a scenario that talks about folklore and whatnot, and how many people, that's typically how it goes with one of these supernatural things. And you'll find out, well, in the past they had all these writings about a specific demon or something like that. And I suppose it could get there. But I think it needs to. Now, for this movie, and it's done very well. It's an entertaining movie. Like I said, it's blessed with its star. I think she really carries it. And but a lot of it is just, it's the same thing. She's tormented by this monster, and there's different light show here of different ways the monster does it, but it's ultimately the same. So for a third film, which is, I'm sure, is likely based on its success, I would think you need to expand on it. You can't just do another example of somebody being tormented by this thing, and ultimately it's the same story, regardless of what their occupation is or their station in life or what have you. So I enjoyed the movie. It has the atmospherics, but I can't really. It's fine technically and all of that sort of stuff. It's just very repetitive of the first one, and to the point that I think that's something of a detriment. However, there's some really interesting. There's an interesting opening sequence. There's some interesting aspects to it, and of course, the star is the main high point here. But also, really, the saving grace is the ending, which is kind of obvious, and yet at the same time I said, oh yeah, that is what would happen. So, almost I'm like, well, I'm liking this, but I know it's not really as good as it should be. That sort of thing, which is not a bad place to be. As far as surpassing the first one, no, because it's too much of the same plot. However, there's some cool elements to it, a great star, and the ending, well, the ending's pretty good. Which does, I don't know. I mean, does that really open the door to a really different and more challenging sequel? The challenge is there already, but I mean, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I wonder how they would handle it, or if they just move on somebody else. Because, like I said, the opening sequence, I think enough of that suggests it's just going on all the time, and multiple people could be suffering at the hands of these entities, and that sort of thing. And another thing about some of this stuff is, like, when you keep it a mystery and secret, it does have a certain power to it that's even scarier than if you begin to understand what it is and you define it, and it loses a lot of its magic. However, with something like that, you really need to just let it be one and done. But they didn't. But it could be. There's only 2 of these. The third movie does another redo of this. I think that'll be one too many for that. But for Smile 2, it entertained the audience, I think. It earned its keep in that respect. And even though I have my complaints about it, I did enjoy the movie. So there you have it for Smile 2.